I do have with me none other than a tax expert, and I think it's quite pertinent that we start with someone of this ilk, given all the contestation around VAT. His name is Ruben Johannes. He's the Director for Tax at Deloitte Africa. Thank you so much for joining us, Ruben. So, we're hearing, of course, that there is discussion about VAT. It looks as though the DA is absolutely against any increase in VAT. Do you think ultimately there will be some sort of compromise, that the finance minister may raise VAT by a slight margin? And even if that happens, of course, there's a process that takes place thereafter.
Yeah, good morning, Nompu, and thank you for having me again for Budget 2.0. As you correctly say, I think there may unfortunately ultimately be some sort of compromise. My view is that there shouldn't be an increase in the VAT rate. But as National Treasury have pointed out themselves, our VAT rate at 15% is below the OECD average of 19%. And on that basis, they believe there's scope for a VAT increase. There's 60 billion rand that they were hoping to raise through the 2% VAT increase. I don't think we'll see a 2% VAT increase. There may be a compromise, or maybe a 0.5% or 1%. That will have to be balanced with some cut in expenditure, as well as possibly some other tax proposals to raise additional revenue.
Yeah. Now, obviously, with the VAT story changing, it means other things may change. In the budget that wasn't tabled, there was a proposal to leave the fuel levy unchanged. That hasn't been raised, I think, for the past 4 years now. So there's a lever there that the finance minister could pull. And also, there was no adjustment in terms of the medical tax credits, which the finance minister has threatened they'll get rid of altogether in the run-up to the NHI. Do you think that they might tinker with those?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where they will tinker. So, as you correctly say, there was a proposal to not increase, so in the budget that wasn't tabled, a proposal to not increase the general fuel levy, which hasn't been increased since 2022. And that was meant to provide a 4 billion rand in relief. So I think we could now see an inflationary increase there, so to raise the additional 4 billion. There was also a proposal not to increase the initial tax brackets by inflation. I think that will now happen possibly, so that they raise possibly an additional 3 billion from that, based on the numbers they've put forward. So we may see those slight increases, along with, as I have to re-emphasize, I think there needs to be a cut down in expenditure.
Yeah. So some civil society organizations are talking about National Treasury pushing back the corporate income tax to 28% as opposed to 27% where it is now. So it used to be 28%. Isn't that a little bit of a red herring, since ultimately companies only pay tax when they're profitable?
Correct, that's correct, Nampu. And as you say, we've only recently decreased that corporate tax rate from 28 to 27%. At 27%, we're still not very competitive globally. So out of 123 countries, I think we rank 13th in terms of corporate income tax as a percentage of GDP. And to attract foreign direct investment, what your multinationals are looking at is, one of the things they're looking at is, of course, your corporate income tax rate, along with how easy it is to do business in a country, etc. And so that would make us a little uncompetitive if we were to increase our corporate tax rates further.
Yeah. And one last thing, a lot of debate during the last budget that was supposed to take place on the 19th of February around the comments that were made by the SARS Commissioner, rather invest in us as a tax administrator rather than increasing taxes. Is that an argument that you agree with? Since, according to the SARS Commissioner, there's something like 800 billion rand out there that needs to be extracted and brought back into the fiscus, but they don't necessarily have the tools to do it.
Yeah, so I think SARS remains an efficient organ of state. There is probably capacity or room to improve capacity even further. I think the Commissioner alluded to illicit flow of funds of some 450 billion rand. We of course have a big informal economy, Nompu, which also largely remains untaxed, and so that is another area that can be looked at. I think SARS does a fantastic job of collecting the taxes that are on the table. Whether there's more that they can do remains to be seen, but ultimately I think what needs to happen is we have to broaden the tax base. We need to get our unemployment rate down. We need to get more people into the economy and grow our economy and add more taxpayers rather than continuing to look to tax the existing taxpayer.
All right, super. Thank you so much, Ruben, for your time there and your insights. That was Ruben Johannes. He's a director for tax at Deloitte Africa. And as he says, very importantly, the elephant in the room, time and time again for the past decade, has been growth. We need economic growth. That can solve so many of our problems. And it will be quite a headache for National Treasury because they had estimated that in 2024, growth will have been 0.8%, but it was actually a measly 0.6%. And that's despite the fact that for 9 months of that year, we didn't have load shedding. So there are a lot of constraints on the economy. And the expectation was that over the next medium term, then over the next 3 years, we'd be growing at an average of 1.8%. Can we really more than double growth over the next 3 years? Well, it remains to be seen. And that will also likely mean that they have to rejig their forecast based on what we saw for 2024. I'm going to hand it back over to Ayanda.
All right, Nompumelelo Siziba, all very poignant points being made as we kick off our coverage around this big story. For now, thanks very much indeed. Nompu, of course, reporting live from Cape Town. We'll be going back to the mother city, so to speak, as we continue building up, of course, to 2 p.m. if indeed Budget 2.0 does go ahead.